People think the Appalachian Mountains are peaceful. Quiet trails, old trees, empty land. But the truth is, those mountains have been watching people disappear for hundreds of years, and sometimes, when you're deep enough in them, it feels like something is watching you back. These are 3 allegedly true horror stories from the Appalachian Mountains, all told by the people who lived through them. I grew up close enough to the Appalachian Mountains that they never felt mysterious to me. They were just there, always watching from the edge of town. Everyone I knew had a story tied to them. Hunting trips, camping weekends, getting lost for a few hours and laughing about it later. What people didn't do was hike alone off the marked trails. I did anyway. It was late October when I went out, the kind of day where the air feels sharp in your lungs and the trees look like they're already dead even though winter hasn't fully arrived yet. I parked near a trailhead I'd used before, shouldered my pack, and headed in just before noon. About an hour in, I noticed something subtle but unsettling. The trail markers stopped appearing. No blazes on trees, no signposts. Just a narrow path pressed into the leaves, like it had been walked recently but not officially maintained. I hesitated, checked my phone, and saw that the GPS still showed me on the trail. That was good enough for me. The deeper I went, the quieter it became. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but then I realized I hadn't heard a bird in several minutes. No squirrels rustling, no wind through the canopy, just my boots and my breathing. That's when I smelled something sour. Not rot exactly, more like wet fur left too long in the rain. I stopped walking. The forest didn't react. No sudden noise, no movement. Just that oppressive stillness, like I'd stepped into a space I wasn't supposed to disturb. I turned around to head back. The path behind me looked wrong. It was still there, but it didn't feel like the same trail I'd just walked. The trees seemed closer together, the ground more uneven, and there were footprints in the dirt that hadn't been there before. Bare footprints, too large to be human. I stood frozen, listening. That's when I heard it. A single step behind me, heavy, deliberate, close enough that I felt the vibration through the ground. I didn't turn around. I told myself it was a deer, a bear, anything but what my instincts were screaming. And then I heard breathing, not panting, not snorting, just slow, controlled breaths. Like whatever was behind me knew I was aware of it. I forced myself to move, walking faster, then faster still. The footsteps followed, matching my pace perfectly. When I stopped, they stopped. When I took one step, it took one. At one point, I whispered, "I know you're there." The breathing stopped. Something else replaced it, a sound that almost resembled my own voice, repeating the words back to me. Slightly wrong, slightly delayed. That's when I ran. I didn't follow the trail. I crashed downhill, through brush and briars, sliding, falling, tearing my hands open. I didn't stop until I reached a creek I recognized from childhood. The moment I crossed the water, the forest came back to life. Birds, wind, normal sounds flooding in all at once. I looked back once. There were no footprints behind me. Later that night, I was walking to one of the local bars. I asked an older local about the area I'd wandered into. I showed him the location on my phone. He stared at the screen for a long time, then shook his head. "That trail doesn't have a name," he said, "and if it ever shows itself to you, it means you stayed too long." I had already been drinking, so I didn't think much at the time. The next day, I'd reflected on the events, and it's safe to say I was very much creeped out. I was part of a small volunteer search group in the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina. Nothing official, just locals helping locals when someone went missing in rough terrain. It happened often enough that nobody acted surprised when the call went out. A solo hiker hadn't returned after 2 days. His car was found abandoned at a pull-off near an old service road. No sign of a struggle. Just an empty vehicle and a trailhead leading straight into thick forest. There were 4 of us that night. We weren't planning to search in the dark, just to hike in a few miles and set up camp so we could start fresh at first light. The forest felt wrong almost immediately. The air was heavier than it should have been, like it didn't want to move. Our headlamps cut narrow tunnels through the trees, but everything beyond the light felt closer than it should have. We set up our tents in a small clearing just before midnight. No fire. We didn't want to risk drawing wildlife or worse, attention from people passing through. Inside my tent, I lay awake listening to the night. The usual sounds were there at first. Distant wind, branches creaking, something small moving through leaves. Then, all at once, it stopped. I was just starting to drift off when I heard someone say my name, clear as day. I sat up instantly. "Hello," I whispered. No response. I assumed it was one of the others messing with me, but when I unzipped the tent and looked out, everyone else's tents were closed. No lights, no movement. That's when I heard it again. My name. But this time it came from farther away, from the tree line. The voice wasn't panicked, it wasn't shouting for help. It sounded calm, familiar, almost comforting. I stepped out of my tent. Before I could talk myself out of it, the others emerged one by one, drawn out by the same sound. None of us spoke. We just looked at each other, eyes wide, knowing we'd all heard it. Then the voice changed. It started calling different names, names that belonged to people we knew. One of the guys whispered, "That's my brother's name." Another said, barely audible, "That's my dad." The voice moved as it spoke, shifting deeper into the woods, weaving between trees like it wanted us to follow. That's when something snapped inside me. "Don't answer it," I said. "Whatever it is, don't answer." The calling stopped. For a moment, everything was silent again. Then we heard footsteps, heavy, unhurried, circling the clearing just outside the reach of our headlamps. We could hear leaves compressing under weight that sounded too heavy to be human. At one point, something brushed past my tent wall, not bumped, dragged along it. We stayed awake until morning, backs against each other, lights on, no one sleeping. At dawn, we packed up and left immediately. None of us said a word until we reached the trailhead. Later that day, the missing hiker was found. Alive. He said he'd followed a voice calling his name off the trail. Said it sounded like someone he trusted. When asked who it was, he couldn't remember. He refuses to talk about what happened after sunset. And none of us have gone back into that part of the mountains since. I live on the edge of the Appalachian foothills in eastern Tennessee, far enough out that the road turns to gravel and the trees start pressing in close on both sides. I've walked the same loop every night for years. It's quiet, predictable, and usually the only company I have is my dog, Bear. Bear is a big mixed breed, calm, smart, not easily spooked. He doesn't bark at deer, doesn't chase shadows, doesn't react to noises unless there's a real reason to. That's why the night he stopped dead in his tracks still sticks with me. It was just after sunset. No wind, clear sky. The woods were darker than usual, but nothing felt wrong at first. Bear was walking ahead of me on his leash when he suddenly froze. His body went rigid, tail stiff, ears forward. I thought he'd seen an animal. I followed his gaze toward the tree line on the right side of the road. At first, I didn't see anything, just darkness between the trunks. But the longer I stared, the more I realized the darkness there looked deeper, like the shadows didn't behave the same way as the rest of the woods. Bear started growling, low, steady, controlled. I tried to pull him forward. He wouldn't budge. That's when something shifted. Not stepped out, just leaned forward barely enough to catch the light. Tall, too thin. Its shape didn't match the trees around it, and the longer I looked, the harder it was to tell where it ended and the forest began. Very faint forest ambiance drops. I felt that cold, sinking feeling in my stomach, the kind that tells you to leave now. Bear barked once, loud, aggressive. The shape retreated instantly, sliding backward into the trees without making a sound. No snapped branches, no footsteps, just gone. I turned around and walked home without looking back. Bear stayed pressed against my leg the entire way, his head constantly swiveling like he was tracking something I couldn't see. That night, Bear refused to sleep anywhere but at the foot of my bed. Every few minutes, he'd lift his head and stare at the bedroom door, ears twitching, listening. Around 3 a.m., he growled again. Softly. I didn't hear anything, but I didn't need to. The air in the room felt wrong, heavy, like it was waiting. I stayed awake until sunrise. Since then, Bear refuses to walk that stretch of road. If I try, he plants his feet and pulls the opposite direction, and sometimes, when the wind is right and the forest goes quiet, I hear something pacing us from the trees. It stops when we stop. And whatever it is, it knows Bear's name. If you enjoyed these stories, there's another one on screen now that goes even deeper into the Appalachian Mountains. Subscribe if you want more allegedly true horror stories every week. And let me know in the comments which one disturbed you the most.